Hello, welcome to day two of this work. Again, I'm doing some opening work from Avrukh's book Grandmaster Repertoire, Volume 2, in which I'm going to cover d4 knight f6, the repertoire against this. And before I did some work on this bishop b4 and plenty of moves like c5, a5, or queen, or just a bishop takes d2. And here I'm going to cover in chapter 4 queen e7. So let's see what Avrukh says about this. Now we don't go bishop g2, which is very interesting. Now Avrukh says if we go bishop g2, then black goes knight c6, and if knight f3 now, then takes. If queen takes, then black has knight e4 and queen b4 next, which simplifies the position very much. And after this, if knight captures on d2, then this is not so ideal because the knight belongs to maybe c3. That's what he mentioned in the previous chapter. So first he goes with knight f3. And after this, black has three options from this book. He has b6, he has castles, and also knight c6. And let's see b6, which is in the Queen's Indian style. b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, and now castles. And now black has two options: to castle or to capture on d2. So the setback of castling right away is that white has bishop g5. And here it mentions that bishop f4 would be okay if it wasn't for bishop d6, because the idea of this is after d5 to have c5. And I guess after this you have a3, and after this you can take on c5 and go b4 next. That's nice. Because you cannot capture like this because of b4. Okay. But he has bishop d6, and if you capture, then cd6 happens, and then he has quite a nice control over the central squares. So Avrukh chose bishop g5 for that reason. Bishop g5, h6. Okay, here it mentions d5, which is the most playable alternative to this move, to h6, but after this, h6, because otherwise you cannot play knight d7, since you would weaken your pawn structure as black. At least I have this, and I have a more pleasant game, so after this, h6, not like this, bishop f6, queen f6, and now cd5. And now, of course, black has two options: to capture with the bishop or with the pawn. If he takes with the pawn, that's apparently a bad choice. After this, now you attack the d5 pawn and the bishop on b4. So now black has to do some magic. If queen d6, there's rook c1. And now the bishop is a bit trapped on b4 by his queen. So that's not really very pleasant. What can he do? c5, in that case, it's even worse, because the bishop cannot go back to e7 in any case. Then if a3 here, oh, there is rook c5. Oh, that's a nice one, because if you take on c5, there's queen b7, knight a6, and now you lose a couple of pawns. Okay, that's a nice one. So let's go back here. After d5, knight e5, h6, takes, cd, ed, queen b3, bishop d6 seems the most reasonable to attack the knight on e5, but then white just plays knight c3, and it mentions here that bishop d5 is too early to play. After c6, bishop g2, back, and if this happens, for some reason there's not a big advantage here, because they have the same number of pawns and black is just fine. Maybe slightly worse, but fine. So after bishop d6, they mentioned this variation, and on c6... wait, what happens on bishop e5? Ah, maybe you'd have knight d5 then. Knight d5, and when captures, then to take like this, or what's the point? Take, go here, and then maybe d5, and make this queenside a bit passive. Wait, let's go back. Queen b3, bishop d6, knight c3. This. What's the big point of this? What can be played? Maybe I can also claim that after knight d5, bishop d5, queen d5, c6, after this, you're kinda stuck. I'm a pawn up, but this pawn is doubled, but I think the bigger issue is that this c6 pawn is somewhat weakened, and this pressure along the long diagonal is very, very unpleasant. So I think that's the main reason why you cannot capture on e5 right away. So yeah, if you go knight d7, just play f4, and even if he somehow untangles, there is also some unpleasantness connected with bishop h3, and maybe first something like rook c1 to maybe force c5 to limit the knight to not jump to c5, and then to put some pressure like this, and these pawns are not going anywhere, so it's quite a nice position. So after this, c6 was mentioned in the book, and then just f4, and it says that after pushing e4, black will be worse in this position. So let's go back. We covered ed5. After this, knight e5, h6, takes, cd, and now bishop d5 is mentioned as the lesser evil. And now the issue with this move is that white has e4 now, because now black lacks some central control, and after bishop b7, now there's knight c4 with the threat of e5 next. So that's why the queen goes back, very logical. a3, bishop e7, knight c3. Ah, rook e1, okay. Rook e1, and white still has some slight edge, due to the space advantage, of course. Okay, so that was the move h6. The move d5, and now we are going to go to play h6 to cover it. So let's just go back a bit to repeat some moves. We go here, queen e7, knight f3, very important, by Avrukh. b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles, bishop g5. And now h6, forcing white to make some committal choices. In this case, it's giving up the bishop pair, but getting more space. And now first a3, because I guess if you go knight c3, you can just capture and the bishop is quite good here. So maybe the point is to limit the bishop by getting knight c3 without getting captured, and then go for e4 and somehow limit this guy over here. So that's why after this, a3 first, now the bishop has to go back to e7, and now knight c3 to get e4 on time. And now can black play d5? Okay, it's mentioned here, d5, but we always have this nice knight e5, and now the knight is a bit awkward on b8. It cannot jump to d7, it cannot jump to c6, because there's jump on d7 to fork. So after knight e5, c6. Oh yeah, because the d5 is just under attack. Simple as that. c6, but wait, why not rook d8 to be more flexible? Is that just that much bad? That much worse? Let's see. Maybe you can just take on d5, take and go rook c1 and even go f4 next, like in the previous variation. But they mentioned c6, which seems quite ugly for black because it just closes down the bishop. e4, and now rook d8 is a mistake. And they mentioned that this is much better, but even after that, knight c4, still white has a space advantage, so that's okay. But let's see, why is this so wrong? Sorry, this one c6, e4, rook d8. Now it's bad because of knight g4, queen g6, takes. Now you have this move, you triple attack on d5. That's a nice one, and if you need, you can go queen f3 as well, or queen b3 and quadruple attack. Okay, that was nice. So let's promote this variation. Bishop e7, knight c3, and now d6. It looks like a Bogo Indian style move, not to play d5 like in the Queen's Indian style. D6, and now we have something similar to the previous chapters, but in this case I think we don't have the bishop pair like in the previous cases. Yeah, I think we don't. So now queen c2, but why not e4 immediately? Aha, this makes a threat of knight g5 next. That's nice, because of the checkmate and also the bishop, which is undefended on b7. So now black plays c6. Wow, that's pretty awkward. Queen g6 is given here, but why would anyone play this? You take, go here, king f7, and then d5. That's crushing. I mean, not winning, but light squares are gonna be really nicely used. So let's put dubious sign, and yes, c6 to cover this bishop. Rook a d1, knight d7. Okay, here very important is to know how to deal with this move. After d5, it says here black has no time to play this because of knight e5, and again, the knight cannot include himself into the play. And bishop d6 is mentioned, but after this, which is quite interesting, this captures ed5, cd5, cd5. White is clearly better. Yeah, probably because there's this tactic, small tactic, d6, bishop g2, and then ef7 session to capture the pawn. Let's say if you make a passed move like a6, there is d6, and if this, to just capture an f7 and you got an extra pawn. So yeah, this is mentioned here. Knight d7, we were here, and now d5. Exclamation mark. This is the key move in White's concept, and yeah, it's really nice because you don't want to allow d5 and e5 moves to Black to somehow free himself. This seems like it's making the bishop much more passive than it is right now. It's closing it in, and after ed5, now this move. This is quite nice. So what happens on this? Just knight c6 or what? I think it is because you need to capture somehow, because I want to go knight e7 next or knight d5. So you need to somehow deal with this threat. Even if you avoid knight d5 by queen e6, there is knight e7 takes and bishop e7 and you lose the piece. So I think you need to capture, but that doesn't bring you much relief, because after this you might go knight d5 as well. You can capture and claim you have a nice knight on d5, so it's quite bad, I would say, because after, let's just make some random moves. After this I can even go f4, and then after queen h5 just capture on c4, and you have this Sveshnikov knight on d5, and it's pretty much positionally it's lost, pretty much. So after, okay, you don't capture on c4 at all. They mentioned rook f8 as a move in the book, and now b4. You still don't capture, you still delay this, because again, if you take on c4, there's knight c6, and after a6 there's b5, cb5, cb5, and bishop f8. And I'm wondering here what happens if rook ac8. They mention here bishop h3. Oh, you want to go knight c6 next? Probably. Knight c6, or just... wait, rook c7 takes, bishop takes. Takes, yeah, you have two knights which are quite strong, and there's no way to deal with this. You might have to go with queen g6, but it's also quite unpleasant. Okay, so after cb5, bishop f8, bishop d5, now you exchange bishops because you want to occupy the c6 square, as I can understand. After this, White had a clear positional advantage. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that the bishop on f8 currently is not doing its job. Knight's coming to c6 maybe, and Black's position is pretty tough to defend. So let's go back again, let's repeat this line. So we have something like this: d4 knight f6, c4 e6, g3 bishop b4, bishop d2, queen e7, Knight f3 now. b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles, castles, bishop g5. That's the use of castling right away, not exchanging the bishop. And now h6, bishop f6 takes a3 first to get knight c3. And then maybe e4, d6, and now queen c2 first. e4 is maybe also good, but you want to provoke a move like c6 from black side. And also I'm wondering what happens if knight c6 happens. What happens in that case? Let's see, let's turn on the engine for the first time. Aha, just d5. And why is this so wrong? Knight e5? Takes, takes. Oh, I have d6 and then the bishop hangs. Okay. Yeah, and this doesn't make much sense to make the knight so passive, so yeah, I understood. So c6 here seemed like the best, or g6. Yeah, g6 also seems interesting, but it doesn't exist in the book. I'm gonna give it exclamation mark and question mark, like interesting option, and I'm gonna cover it maybe after I finish the book. But now I'm going to blindly follow the book and see how they what they recommend actually. Okay, so c6, c6, and let's turn off the engine. So now we have first rook a1, knight d7, and now d5. This, I would say, temporary pawn sacrifice. e5, knight d4, and after rook fe8, then b4 to undermine this pawn chain by b5 next. And every single time it's impossible to capture on c4 because of knight c6 and knight d5 next. So this b5 comes, and this looks just positionally terrible. Bishop d5, once you exchange bishops, there's no bishop pair, and the knights can come to the fullest potential. And yeah, this is now, I would say, plus minus. Okay, let's check out the other line with the exchange on d2. Over here, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles, castles, no, castles, bishop d2 here. And now I guess queen d2, yeah, queen d2 is the move, because we want to play knight c3 and maybe to play d5 at some point. That's my guess. So now black has 4 choices, I guess, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he has d6, he has castles, three options, castles, and then knight e4. And let's begin with knight e4. Usually white goes to c2 and there's f5 and some pressure. I mean, black holds the center somehow. But here queen goes to f4, and now there's no f5 because of queen c7. So now black has to go d5, I guess, because there's also an option of knight g5, I suppose, if you do nothing about it, if you do just castle. Then you run into this move and you lose some material. So d5 is probably the forced move. Knight fd2, takes, takes, castles, and now rook ac1, putting pressure, indirect pressure on c7. Okay, and now c5. c5 leads to some weaknesses, because after this ed takes, and then b4 even. Oh yeah, now you are going to fix the pawn structure. You're establishing the control over the d4 square, because if you take like this, there is rook c7 and you lose the bishop. So after this, I guess black has to go with c4, and then you can get your knight to d4, you can get some pressure on the d5 square, so it looks quite nice. But here, actually, after rook ac1, the better choice was knight a6. Not allowing any weaknesses in the position. And after this, there is a nice move here, knight c4. Quite nice. Using the fact that there's rook on a8 and knight on a6. So now if black captures, what happens? Attack the queen, queen h5, rook e5, queen g6, and then knight e3, and you regain this pawn, and the knight on a6 is a bit offside. But wait, is there this move? Maybe there's not, because you have something like rook g5, and I mean, you can still go with this one, but I'm not quite sure how it works. Wait, here? Let's see. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Oh, knight f5. That's very nice. Knight f5, and if I just step away, then rook e3. Oh, that is brutal. Like, very brutal. There's no rook c8 because of knight e7. Because of the fork on e7, c6. I think you run into just knight d6 and after c6. Nope. Knight h4. What's that move? Wait, knight d6? Why doesn't it work? Bishop a6. Oh yeah, bishop goes to a6. Foolish me. Wait, we go there. And now you need to exchange queens like this. This, a3 here, and rook e7. Oh, this is very ugly. Look at these pieces. They're just so badly placed. Okay. So after this, they mentioned some line like... Let's just turn off the engine first. They mentioned some line like c6 is there. C6 cannot be played because after this, queen e6, bishop h3. Oh, goodness. Holy smokes. Bishop h3, and if you capture, there is queen f6, I suppose. Queen f... no. Queen f6, and then if g6, knight f5, and then there's checkmate on g7. Or you give up the queen as black, which is the best option. Okay, so we covered knight e4, which is not the best option in the world. Understatement. So d6 here. Knight c3, and now knight e4. Okay, a typical Queen's Indian move. But what happens if we castle here? Then d5 to shut down this bishop. That's a very clever idea. It says here, black still has a fairly solid position. Nevertheless, white's stable positional advantage is quite obvious to me. Let's see a few possible lines. And now he mentions this one. And now knight h4 to use the absence of the bishop from this diagonal. So Now bishop c8, but then e4. Knight g4. So, he wants maybe to go here and to push f5 next. So, I don't lose time. I play rook a e1, knight h6, and then f4. So you strike first in the center. And now if he takes, there's e5. Oof, this is really dangerous, because after this there's d6 and the bishop captures the rook. Okay, that's quite strong. So I guess here it's the best to go knight d7 and knight f3 back, f6. Oh, what is this? How can you play this as black? Bishop h3, knight c5, takes rook a c8. He can't even play c6 because I will then capture d5. Oh my goodness, this, b4, knight d7, knight b5. Ouch. Ouch. Okay, this is a disaster. So yeah, because of potential d5 next, here he plays knight e4. And then we capture, queen e3, bishop goes back, and now d5. Interesting. So I guess the point is, if we take on if he takes on d5, in this case, we might exchange even. We might do this and then go knight d4 or knight h4, which is quite a typical motive in the Queen's Indian, to have this or knight h4. Maybe with the queens on the board it's more efficient to have knight h4, but here I think knight d4 is better because it might hit on c7 after knight to b5. But here it doesn't mention what happens if he does this. Maybe even this is a good move. And then to just, if castles, to go cd5. Let me check. I must check this. It's actually this one. This knight d4 is the best by engine. And now you either capture on d5 with the pawn, or if black goes like this. Oh, there are two options. Like, there is this move, and on this to go knight e3. But what happens after this? Knight d5, king g5, knight c7, rook a d8, and then rook a d1. But maybe I can find something stable. In this case, to capture and take on d5. That seems more stable. Something I would do. Rook a c1, and then maybe pile my rooks on the c file. That seems logical. So this is not covered in the book, but I'm going to just cover some lines to have them for later when I go through the whole book with the engine. Okay, so here black doesn't capture, black goes with e5. But also there is this move, knight d7. And then b4 to stop knight c5, to limit these knights, to limit these pieces, these knights. B4, e5. I mean, if he castles, then just knight d4 should be okay, and then you can capture on e6. That's quite nice. e5, knight d2, and it transposes actually to the position after e5 over here. So let's see how it goes. b4, limiting the pieces on the queen side, which is nice. Knight d7, knight d2, and now a5, a3. We don't allow anything. We stay flexible here. And now black castles. And now they mention here after a4, then I reroute like this. Get to c3 and target the a4 pawn, which is quite nice, quite juicy. I might not take it immediately, but in the long run I think it's a quite a weak pawn. Okay, so they don't push their luck by a4, they just castle. Oh no. Knight b3, so maybe I'm trying to provoke a4 to get this maneuver later on. So maybe I want to provoke a4 and then to, let's say, if a4 to go back to d2 and to get something like this. And they mention a4 as the main line, which is interesting. Wait, what happens if AB, rook fe8? Okay, what happens if they just exchange everything? Rook a8, and now you just take and go c5. Oh, again there's this dc d6 idea, which is losing the bishop. That's nice. So what now? Rook a1, rook a8, c5, and yeah, now black has to capture like this, but the bishop is quite bad there. bc, dc, d6. I mean, if you don't do anything, I'll go c6 and the bishop is just dead, completely dead. Completely. So now he can capture, but then there's d6, queen e8, dc7, bishop g2, king g2, queen c8, this. Oh, this endgame. This looks interesting with 4 against 3. I mean, I don't know if I could grind out this one. I have one more drawish positions than this one, so I would be delighted to play this one, especially against some stronger opponents. Okay, so let's go back over here, and again we play c5. If black doesn't exchange rooks, we play c5, and now black has to capture. And again, dc doesn't work because of this. So knight captures, takes, and now rook ab1. But now d6 is not gonna work because after this we suck. So after this, rook ab1, rook ab8. Wait, if bishop a6 happens, Then there's d6, and after this, rook a1 is quite strong because now the bishop is a bit stuck because it doesn't want to go because it would just force a trade. Okay, now rook a b8. Instead, rook fc1. Now we target the c5 pawn. That's nice. This rook a1 because the e2 pawn is under attack and I cannot exchange and then take on c5 because e2 just hangs. And then I have also some back rank issues. So this, and now rook c5. And it says here, despite massive exchanges, white's pressure has only increased because the c7 pawn is a serious weakness. And after this, rook ac1, bishop b5, and now we take on c7, and we have a d-passed pawn, which is quite nice. Oh, rook c6, that sucks. Okay. So actually, a4 is the best choice here, according to the book. And now we don't go to d2 and this maneuver, because maybe after this there's f5 and black might get some counter chances by e4 and even undermining these pawns by b5. Why not? So after this, there's knight d4 using the pin, so now the queen goes back, and now knight b5. We get our idea. Or maybe not. Maybe not. Bishop a6. Ah, now you cannot go back. So that sucks. So we have to go here, f5, queen c2. And now he takes because a4 hangs. And I mean, if you go back to b7, then at least I can go knight c3 back and take on a4. So let's just promote this one. This, queen c2, bishop b5, and now cb5. I doubled the pawns, but there is lots of pressure on the c file. Also, I might provoke something by bishop h3 and d4 and get the e6 for my bishop. So I feel like this is quite good for white. Okay, so what do we have left? Let's go back. We have this, knight f3, b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles, and castles, bishop d2, queen d2, and now castles right away. Knight c3, knight e4. Wait, what happens if d5? If d5, then we take. Aha, ed5 transposes to the chapter 2 from the previous video. Okay, because yeah, in that chapter bishop takes d2 is immediately played, and we have that exactly. And there, if I recall correctly, knight h4 is played, and we have some unpleasant knight f5 jumps. Yep. So we won't cover this. Knight d5 is the main move here, but rook ac1. knight a6, because you need to, if you go here, then I just capture and you're done. Knight a6, knight e5, c5, takes, knight c5, and you take, and we have the ISO on d5. That's nice. Then go back and get to d4, have a very decent position as white. Okay, now let's go back. Takes, queen f4. Now we attack c7 and the bishop. And now black goes d5. I mean, capturing on f3 is not really serious. Takes, c6, rook ac1, knight a6, rook c3, and then this. You might even go for c5 at some point and just dominate completely. Okay, so d5 seems like the best choice. Rook ac1 and now knight a6 to defend this pawn. Okay, what happens on c5? Let's check it out. We can capture ed5, because I mean, if you take like this, I can take and probably just go b3 and just put pressure on c5. It's better to have hanging pawns than just a set pawn on c5, I think. bc, queen e3, queen b7, and then they mention also this move, but we can capture, go here, queen d2, go back, rook fc1, knight a6, which is quite logical, and after this knight d4. Again, we have this ISO on d5, and it's not easy for black. ISO. So after this, c5 takes, queen e3, queen b7. They mention also knight a6 here, which is bad. After this, we use the pin, so black has to go here, rook c4, f5, and now g4. Clever. But wait, here knight a6, no, here c5, takes, here, queen e3, queen b7, and now we take. Queen b2 and now queen c3. But wait a second. If I capture here, there's rook a1 maybe, or no. Knight d2 maybe, or I don't know. What's possible? What's possible? Let's see the engine. Knight d4. And wait, what happens if this knight f5? Wow. Okay, this is crushing. This, and then just go figure, yeah. Aha, they mentioned this. Wow, I didn't see that it was in the book. So knight d4, queen a6 is the best. And also they mentioned this bishop g2 and knight f5, so everything is cool. Takes, knight f5, and now queen f6, the only move. Takes, rook c4. And it says here the endgame is difficult for black. Okay. I can see that. I can see that. So let's go back here. Instead of c5, they mention knight a6 as a choice. I take, and now bishop d5. But wait a second, bishop d5, e d5. What happens then? Oh, bishop h3. f6 to stop knight e5. And now a3 to limit this knight. And now if you go c5, then takes, knight d2, bishop g6, and queen a4. Now if you go knight c7, then there's queen c6 at least, and then black simply collapses. If you go here, then just you might even take on c4, or just go bishop d7 as well. Oh well, bishop d7, rook f7, it might work out for black, but maybe just knight c4, and that could be the game over. Or b3. Yeah, b3 looks excellent. But here they mentioned just queen b7. And after bishop g2, white is slightly better. Okay. We can do that. c d5, bishop d5 is the other option, and now knight e5. And in case of capturing and going c5, there is a small edge after this. Now this doesn't work because of b4, and now wait, queen b7. Queen b7, queen f3. Takes, knight a6, and now after knight c6, the knight is very stupid on a6. So actually here bc is the better choice, but it makes the structure much worse. After this, it transposes to the main line. Okay, we'll see it. We will see it. So c5 is the main line. dc, bc, queen a4, and now this, check, king g1, and now rook fd8. Wait, if he took knight c4, and after this rook b1 wins, because if you go to c8, then there is knight d6 and you take on a6, and that's it. So it has to go like this. After that, now rook c4. Wait, I cannot go here, right? Maybe just simplifies too much. After this, rook b4 and then I take on b2. Maybe it's even worse for me, because in that case a2 and d2 will be hanging. In case of this, just take on b2, and I mean you can always bail out probably with this one, with rook c8 probably. And then if this attack on a7 and just be good. But okay, we played this, and yeah, this is quite pleasant. Quite pleasant for white. Okay, now we have the second choice. We covered the b6 move, the Queen's Indian type move, and now we should cover castling. And also, just to mention that there's lots of transpositions in these lines. Bishop g2, but now I think it's too late to play b6, because you might just run into knight e5, and that's not really what you want. So here black took on d2, queen d2, and now d6. Knight c3, and now e5. Castle? Okay. I guess e4 is impossible because of knight g5. Knight g5, and now you attack the e4 pawn. If bishop f5, then queen f4, I guess, and then you take on e4 next. Okay, so it's not in the book, but I think it's the right way to go. So they have something like knight c6 here. Also bishop g4. Rook e8. And also c6, which is quite peculiar. But then we just play e4, and after this knight h4 is also possible. Knight a6, rook a e1. Aha, maybe we want to go f4 next. Exactly, yeah. f4, and after this capture. This is quite good. This is excellent. Okay, so let's just go back a bit. Bishop g2, bishop d2, queen d2, d6, knight c3, e5 castles, knight c6, and now knight d5. Oh. So what happens if I take cd, this, and now I go first, rook ac1. So actually this pawn is not running away, because I attack also c7, so it's impossible to hold both. And after this they mention rook e8, rook e1, queen f6. But then I take here, and what happens? b6, rook c4, d3, and we have this one. After this, e4, and then d3 pawn becomes a target. So actually queen d8 here is the better choice. Queen d8 and then rook a d1. Interesting. Rook e8 by black. Trying to put some pressure maybe on e2 pawn. And here bishop g4 was possible. And after this, knight d5. But wait, if I go here, what happens? Oh, there's this. Queen e3 and now knight d7 to save the pawn. Rook d2 and now after capturing ef. I guess to undermine this pawn. To do that maybe. And because maybe if I take with the bishop now, you have this and then c6 and black might have a good play here, but after ef he fails to have the outpost on d4 because after this there's f6 and you take twice and play f4. So that's quite nice. Now the knight is very unstable on d4 and my bishop on g2 can become quite a good factor. Okay, what else? So we were here and knight d5 was played as the main move. cd, knight e5 and then knight d4, just avoiding any trades. And in the future I guess that c7 is going to become a huge problem for black. And also I might have e4 f4 as my good center. Okay, so we were here, queen d8, rook a d1 and now rook e8. Now we can capture. Knight captures. So actually here if you take with the pawn again, we have this strong queen e3. So the point here is after capturing, to take with the pawn maybe, or what's the point? Maybe this. And now the knight has to go back and then we put some pressure maybe on c7 as well. We'll check that out. But later we take d5 now. Wait, if rook e5 now, what happens? Queen, knight c3. Yeah, this looks quite pleasant because the bishop cannot move out from c8 because of this. And also I might have some strong center after e4, f4. Looks good. So he takes like this, makes it symmetrical, but I have this one. Wow, now this is a problem. So this seems like the logical answer. cd5, queen d6. And now just switch to the c file. Attack this guy, so after this we just double. And white's better. Okay. That's nice. So let's go back a bit. Let's see what happened. We have this, knight f3, castles, bishop g2, bishop d2, takes d6, knight c3, e5 castles, and now we covered Knight c6, but now let's cover this bishop g4. Knight e1. Whoa. And then this move. But wait, if you take on d4, what happens? Takes knight c6, queen d2, queen d7, and then knight d5. Oh, and again we have the similar position with the c pawn becoming the d pawn, and then we put some pressure on this guy here. After this, rook c1. Okay, this is quite nice. If queen b5, which makes lots of sense to have knight c4 next and to attack, or also to just capture the pawn, then we have knight f3. Bishop f3 takes rook ac8 and then rook c3, followed by this and f4. And actually his extra pawn on the queen side doesn't help at all. Actually it's white who is much safer because of this extra pawn. And I like this very much. Okay, so what happens if he doesn't capture? If he goes for this? Here natural looks d5, but he mentions here that after this e4 c6, this takes knight a6, black is holding together, let's say. But also he's quite passive here, and it's not a bad position to have. So let's put exclamation mark and question mark. But here actually this move is recommended by Avrukh. And now if you capture like this and take on d4, this is a mistake, because now you have e3, and if knight f5, then h3 followed by g4. And if it goes to b5, then just a4 and the knight is trapped. So actually black can go back. Black has to go back. And now I capture. If knight captures, then knight e3. And then bishop has to go back to defend the pawn. Rook d1, queen e7, and then knight d3 with some pressure. By the way, I'm not planning to learn all these variations. I just want to see some ideas in certain openings. This is what I lack sometimes in my play. Not knowing which plans exist in the certain openings, which helps very much. Okay, so here they capture on e5, and now h3, bishop e6. This reminds me of some King's Indian in the fianchetto variation, when you also exchange on e5 and have this structure, but of course black also has the fianchetto with g6. Bishop e6, rook d1, rook e8, and then knight c2. White is slightly better. Yeah, mainly because of this knight here, and on the contrary, this knight cannot jump to d4 at any moment, so it's a bit annoying. Okay, so let's go back again. Do this. Castles, bishop g2, takes, d6, knight c3, e5 castles, and now let's check out the rook e8 move. Now e4. e4, bishop g4. Looks logical to somehow destabilize this control over d4. But now we go this way. Wait. Wait a second. What happens if I go d5? They mention here bishop f3, and then a5, followed by knight a6 and maybe knight c5. Yeah, this could be a bit annoying for me as white. As black, I would love to play this position. I would take it anytime. But with white, you might have to prove something and it might turn out ugly. Okay, so 91 is the better choice, I guess. At least Avrukh says so. But okay, let's just put some signs like unclear after a5. And let's see this one, 91, knight c6. Seems logical because this one doesn't look that natural. Taking knight c6, queen d2 back. Now a5 and then f3. Bishop e6, knight d5, queen d8, knight c2, and then just bring the knight to e3 and defend c4, which is quite nice. Quite nice. Okay, so knight c6, to me it seemed more natural. And now we played this one because I don't want to allow d5, knight d4. That would be just too uncautious. Let's just promote this first. So this, knight e1, knight c6, and then knight c2. And now we want to go d4 because black doesn't have the knight d4 himself. So now he took, takes, queen d4, and now queen e5. The whole point of this, because if he doesn't do it, then it doesn't get justified to just allow this capture on d4. After this, queen h5, so he wants to just exchange the bishop. f3, bishop h3, and now rook ac1. Aha, we want to go knight d5 and again to somehow force the trade and put pressure on c7. That seems great. And now if bishop g2 we take, queen e5, rook d1, rook a d8, and now queen f2. Aha. And then this, no. Rook d2, b6, b4, knight d7, and then just jump. I don't know how important was to play b6 here, because it just makes it much worse. Much worse. Around here, maybe just don't play b6, please. Because this is just an awful position. Black is just waiting for things to happen and it's not promising too much. And also, instead of capturing on g2, there is this move. And let's see, g4 now. Oh. Queen c5, queen f2. Now you force the trade of queens. Takes, takes, bishop takes, king takes, and now c6 to stop knight d5. But now d6 becomes a weakness. And now we just put some pressure. Expand. Okay, this is just some game, random game, but it's nice to see the ideas. Nothing of this is gonna happen in the game, but it's always nice to see something similar. Rook cd1, king h7, king g3, king g6, c5. Yeah, this is okay. This is pretty good. So that's also about castling. And let's check out this move, knight c6. So now we cannot play this, as I mentioned in the beginning, because after this we need to capture with the knight, which is not our wish in this particular line. We want to capture like this, but there is knight e4 and queen b4 check. Let's say this, queen b4, and it's not so pleasant. Okay, even if you go here, queen b4 is quite good, and you might have to go knight e2 and do something else, but it's not what they want. So now knight c3 is the move. Knight c3, and now they have three moves: d5, castles, or bishop c3. But this looks like some kind of Chigorin, but or Ragozin, something like that, some weird mix. We play a3, bishop c3, and now a5. Okay, what happens if knight e4 happens? There's no knight e4. Okay, there is something like this. Castles, bishop g2, and now if knight e4, then queen c2. Transposing to the main line. Okay, so after this and bishop d8, castle, knight e4, queen c2, bishop d7, and now b4. Oh, and this looks good for me. I expand, I have lots of space, so that's cool. And what happens after this? What happens if I go b6? b6, queen c2, bishop b7, and now b3. I'm not thrilled, but let's see what happens. a5, bishop b2. a4. This, rook fc1, rook dc8, and now this. Once you exchange the bishops, it becomes quite tough because c6 becomes occupied. So he plays this. Queen d3, knight d7, and now just don't exchange because black is lacking some space and you don't want to exchange. And now just double. This is quite nice. Quite nice. But wait a second. Okay, we were here and black played a5. Okay, bishop g2, castles, rook d8. Aha, there is one interesting variation here. Knight e4, queen c2, and then a4 to somehow disconnect these pawns. But with the pawn on a4, it's tough to get also this maneuver. Rook ac1, bishop d7 now to defend the a4. Rook fd1, and yeah, now the c7 becomes quite bad, because now if you do this, I can just take on d5 and take on c7, and it's not working out. So after a4, rook ac1, bishop d7, rook fd1, rook fd8, bishop e1. So you preserve the bishop pair. Bishop e8 himself, knight h4, knight f6 back. Takes, and now the famous knight f5. Queen e6 and then f3, and now g6 by black. This, queen d2. And then we have g4, and then the bishop comes to life by bishop g3, which is quite good. Okay, so we checked that out. Rook d8 now, instead of this. Queen c2, knight e4. Again, if he goes with a4, it's not easy to generate something, because you can just go knight e5, bishop d7, rook fd1, and then rook ac1. Okay, this, and now b3. Interesting. And what happens if I take queen c3? And then bishop d7 can be played, and I might capture on d5 and then put rook on c1. They don't mention anything, so I'm not sure how to continue here. Maybe not even to take on d5 to free the bishop. Why would I do that? Just go rook d1, e3, and slowly push it. But actually they mentioned here e5 as a very bad move, because after taking d4, this one, bishop g4, this looks like some kind of counter Albin counter gambit. Rook fd1, queen c5. So they mention here, if takes queen e5, then there's rook d3, and you put some pressure on the d4 pawn. Makes sense. So after this, you do this, a4, b4 takes, rook c1 here and queen a1. And what happens on this? Knight e1. Wow, just go for this or just take on c6 next. Queen e6, takes, rook d4. And be a pawn up. Okay. And what about bishop d7 here? So we went back. And now bishop b2, you just preserve this bishop. Bishop e8 and now rook ac1. The point was to defend the a3 pawn before you go to c1, so that's nice. f6. So he wants to include his bishop like this. But then we have this one. Interesting. g5 takes. Now we have this jump. As always. Bishop h3, wow. And then e4. Break this. Wait, give me a second just. So we have this and bishop g6, but what happens if I do this? Just d5, right? d5, and if I take bishop f6 here and some check like this. It has to be game over. So put here question mark, bishop g6, ed5. Okay, queen d5 and then this. Queen f7, wait. If I take, then it's a bloodbath. Like, you can take on c7 or take on f6 as well. And then push d5. So yeah, this is game over. And after this, Black's king seems a bit shady here, because when the bishop opens up, when I push d5, it's gonna be terrible. Let's go back then. We have this. Knight c6 and knight c3. And now we had d5. We had this. But now let's take a look at castling. Bishop g2. And now we got couple of more options for black. We have d6 or knight a5. D6 or this one. Let's go first with d6. Now we have this move. Knight b8. I mean, going to d8 doesn't make much sense. It's not working at all, so after this, takes, knight d5, takes, and this, the knight on d8 becomes redundant. Okay, so the second move is knight e5, but you can take, and then go a3. And okay, if you take bishop c3, and it seems quite nice. And if it goes to c5, then knight a4. Aha, you want to catch the bishop. So after this, to just take and go rook c1. Yeah, this looks quite pleasant. So we have what move? Bishop c3. Yeah, we take, and after this, take on e6. But even this is good for us to have this, and then to push maybe e4, knight e3, and in the future to push for f4. So here d6, fe6, castles a5, knight d4. Yeah, this also looks quite nice. Queen d2, a4, and then this one, typical King's Indian move. Knight c5, and then take, and then f4. Interesting. But the main move here is to go back to b8, because you want to somehow get your knight to c5 as black. Takes, fe, and now castle. But now knight c6, not going to c5 actually. And now we do this. We want to somehow force the bishop to give itself for the knight, so we can get the bishop pair. And if he does it immediately after this, bishop c3 and e5, trying to limit our bishop, then I go here and get to e3. Bishop e6, knight d5, and this looks quite good. After f4, every exchange on d5 means that I have some pressure on the c file, so that's quite reassuring. But actually, black doesn't have to capture immediately on c3. He can just go king h8 first, which is mentioned here, knight c2, and then to capture. Bishop d7 and then b4. Trying to go for b5 and to capture on b7. So, oh no. First he goes to e8 to keep the rooks connected, because if he doesn't do it right now, then the knight can disrupt this connection between the rooks. So that's why he does it like this. Wait. But still, I play b5, knight d8, and then f4. Queen f7, and then queen d3. Followed by rook a d1. Okie dokie. Okay, so around here, bishop g2. Now let's check out this move. Knight a5, so we have to defend the pawn by b3. And now b6. Castles, bishop b7, and now queen c2. And Now black has a very interesting option to go for c5, to go for some kind of hedgehog position, but after this black has to give up the bishop pair, and after this white has some pressure because black doesn't have the bishop on dark squares, so it might be a bit problematic to handle, because you cannot play d6 at any moment. It's very risky, and yeah, it's just a bit unpleasant. So here actually the better is this move, but again we play a3. And now black captures, but what happens if he does this? Then bishop takes, knight e4, and then not knight e4, bishop e4. Oh yeah, because the knight on a5 will be just doubling the pawns. So after bishop e4, queen b2, d6. Now bishop h3, and now you avoid exchanging bishops to get knight e2. Without exchanging, of course. And this knight on a5 becomes a bit silly. But what happens if I do this and he captures? He just calls my bluff, and now we play e4, and we want to go e5 next. Bishop b4 here, because now there's no d6. That's the point of the whole line, to not have d6 because the bishop was on a3. And this is quite cute. Now e5 and bishop f3 first. But wait. If you take on c3, I just take on f6 first, and then take with the queen to defend the knight on f3. Nice. So yeah, that's plus minus. After e5, he took on f3, but also it's possible to play back to e8. But then after this move, f5 takes, you take on a7, you get the pawn back, and you have some initiative on both sides actually. So they took on f3, bishop f3, and now it's quite awkward, this knight on a5. Knight e8, and now after bishop g2, it says black has compensation, which really does exist. And let's see what's the point of this move. So the main point of bishop g2 is to remove the bishop from the f file and thus be ready to meet f6 with f4. That's nice. He will not show any concrete lines, but he believes that white has wonderful positional compensation due to black's poorly placed minor pieces, especially this knight on a5, which is just ridiculous. Okay, that's enough for me. Like, to see this position with the bishop pair and with poorly placed black pieces, it's enough to just not think about concrete lines. Okay, so we have this, we have a3, knight c3, and now the main move, I guess, is bishop c3. Bishop c3, knight e4, and then rook c1 to not allow a doubling of the pawns. That's quite logical, but now black has a couple of options. He has d6. He has castle, as always. And also knight b4, which is quite strange. Now white can play this, and after a5, bishop g2, castles, bishop d2, no, knight d2. Then after this to recapture like this. Aha, this makes lots of sense because the pawn is on a5 now, and now when you double these pawns, it's not possible to have knight c6, knight a5 maneuver, which would target potentially c4. So yeah, that's a nice point. And after this to go c5, that's also quite nice, gaining more space and trying to undouble in case he plays d6 or b6. So that's cool. After d5 takes cd, now rook b1 to make this bishop buried on c8, and after this to go queen b3, and white's better, clearly better. Okay, so after rook c1, let's check out d6 first. Now d5 happens, and we have this exchange because the g7 is hanging, so you don't have basically any other option. Takes, and now we have two big moves, knight b8 or knight d8. Putting the knight on e5 would quickly lead to cramped position. White just takes it and it's better. There's no need for further details. Okay. Amazingly, one game was played between GMs with knight e5, though admittedly it's just a rapid game. Benjamin was black and eventually drew an inferior position after Sosonko played blah 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 blah. Okay, so we're gonna just look at knight b8 or knight d8. Let's check out knight d8, which seems a bit inferior because the knight seems a bit stupid there. Like it doesn't have plenty of future, let's say. Bishop g2, okay, and now e5. And now c5 by white. Castles, takes, and queen c1. Quite interesting. And now you see that the knight on d8 is disconnecting the rooks, and the rook is just going to jump to c7 without remorse. Castles, f5, rook c7, yep. Queen e8, and now queen e3. Queen e3, bishop b5, and then just double bishop a6 and go here. Black's bishop is missing from the defense, so white immediately starts playing on the king side. h6, bishop h3, and after this queen f3. Oh, such a nice move. Because now if you exchange queens, the f5 becomes vulnerable and you can't play g6. So that's quite nice. If you go f4, then I guess you can just go rook e7 and plant everything. Or just knight g6, to be honest. Knight g6, and if this happens, then rook c8. And black apparently loses the knight. Because first black has to capture like this, and then there's no way to defend the knight. So that's nice. And that's why knight d8 is a bit dubious. So I guess that this is the most promising choice here. Knight b8, and now white captures, which is a bit weird. Maybe he doesn't want to block the position to allow this by e5 and knight c5 next. So that's why he does it, I guess. d6, f6. Wait, but if bishop e6, what happens? Knight d4, castles, bishop g2, c6, castles. Yeah, I'm slightly better. I have some pressure later on d6, so it's okay. It's cool. After fe, I have this move, castles, and now bishop g2. Now you cannot go knight d7 because of knight e6. And if you go c6 to somehow block the bishop, then they mention castle. And then a5, queen d2, knight d7, rook d1, knight e5, and now knight f3. If you trade, then I guess you just take with the rook and you force him to play d5. So he goes back, and now rook a3. Aha, now this a pawn becomes a target. Go here, and now knight g5. So by exchanging knights, you want to make d6 much more vulnerable. And that's what happens. So black is forced more or less to play d5. Rook f3 back, and now this. We take on g5, queen e7, and now go back to d2. And we might just push e4 next. For example, if bishop d7 is played, then we have e4. And that's quite bad. So after this, e5 is the main move. Knight goes back to c2, bishop, knight d7, of course. If bishop moves, then bishop b7. So we have this one. If it goes to c6, what happens? Castle, bishop e6, and now b4, the same unpleasant pressure by pushing b5 next. If you go a5, then b5, and if you go to d8, then you disconnect the rooks. If you go to b4, then you lose the pawn and you win the pawn back, but there's rook a3. And after this, rook a5, and you are just a pawn down. But here, if he takes on c4, there is this, and after bishop e6, there's knight d5. And it seems to be that black is losing the piece. And after b4, a6 could be played, but it doesn't help that much. b5 again, and after this, knight b4. Takes, king h8, now a4, and then queen c2. After this, queen c2, and again we have some great pressure on the c7 pawn, and it's a nice advantage. I think even if I need, I can play e4 and f4 and try to play on the both sides. Try to do that. Okay, so we're around here. Castle, bishop g2, e5, knight c2, and now we're gonna check c6. Looks sketchy, but let's check it out, because it just weakens the d6. Castle, bishop e6, and now b4, trying to get b5 next. a6. And yeah, here if a5, then I just pass by b5, and if if you get greedy with the bishop a2, then knight e3, and on this bishop d5, and we have a nice knight on d5, which is just crushing. Even knight c7 exists as an option, or rook c7. If this happens, then rook f3 just wins on the spot. Because if you do this, sorry, not like this, but if you do queen e6, then I take and make a fork. So that's not good. What else? What else? A6 instead of a5. So knight e3, knight d7, queen c2, knight f6, and now rook d3. So now we put pressure on this d pawn. He plays that, we played this, rook d7, queen b2, rook a d8, and now a4, trying to break these pawns by b5. Okay, let's go back and let's see what happens on this move, knight a6. Lots of options here. Castle c... oh, not... no. c6. Queen d2, bishop e6. In case of knight c5, there's rook d1, rook f6, and then rook a3, followed by b4, b5. And after queen f7, just go here and jump to e3 and have rook d3 actually. Okay, so bishop e6, knight e3, rook a d8, and now this move to make the knight passive. Queen f7. Wait, you can play d5 here, or what's happening with that? No, you cannot. Oh, and also you want to play bishop c6 to use the tactic. So here to stop this, black can play this, queen c7. What happens in that case? Queen c7. And then we have b4. Always this b4 is a motive. B4, queen b6, rook b3, and then this and a3. Small edge. Okay, so let's go back to the main line. The main line was 97. Castle, and now knight f6. But wait, here there is also a5 mentioned, but it might backfire after rook a3. Knight c5, and now b4, yeah. Rook a5 takes knight c5, and even though I have double pawns on the a file, it's still extra pawn, so I cannot complain. After this I can jump to d5, and if c6, then I put pressure on d6, so it's actually very good. So no, he doesn't play this, he plays knight f6, he doesn't want to make his pawns targets. Now I do this as usually with the knight on c2 and e3, and now c6. And let's say what happens if rook b8 happens to free the bishop. Well, then this takes, and then c5. And now I think white is going to eventually break the pawn structure of black. And that's actually nice. Okay, so c6 is played, but now we just switch plans. Rook d3, rook d8, queen d2, and just double everything. He defends, and now we go with b4 to go for b5, and using this misplaced knight, not being able to defend c6. Now this move. But as usually, there are lots of other options. If this is played, then b5 again. And if takes rook c5, then queen b4, and again you have some pressure in the position. You have some pressure in the position, and black's not out of the woods just yet. Queen b4, and yeah, it's tough for black to push his pawns in the center. So what else? After b4, a6 to somehow stop this b5 or to slow it down. Then we have a4, rook d7, and now b5. Takes with some pressure as well, because again you have options like bishop d5 and exchanging this to get the knight to d5, and also you might just save the bishop and keep the pressure on the b7. So it's quite a nice choice. But the main move is rook d7, trying to defend or to double on d8. This takes, and now rook c8. Now it's possible to play this, and if black captures and does this, then rook a3 is very strong, and a7 becomes a target. So after knight d5, black can go back to d8, and then again rook a3, rook c5, and then take this and knight c3 with some edge, because again you have open b file and you can put pressure on the b7 pawn. Plus the structure in the center is favorable to white because of this backward pawn on d5, so I find it pleasurable to play this as white. Okay, now what shall we do? What's left? So we have to go back to the move 8. Knight e4, rook c1, and now to check out castling. Castling, bishop g2, d6, and now d5. Wait. Aha, this is something similar. I was just like having a déjà vu. Knight d8 is the most fashionable line, at least in 2010. I don't know about today's fashion, but I'll check it out as well. But here, if you take like this, knight d8, castle e5, and then knight e2, it's transposing to the main line. And if black goes to b8, then d6. But also it's possible to play queen c2, actually. Queen c2. But let's check out d6. d6, if bishop e6, then knight d4, bishop d7. If bishop c4, then knight f5 and you target g7, so it's bad. So you go back to d7, castle, knight c6, and now this move. And then bishop d4. And now if a6, well, if rook f8, there is this move. And if b6, then you take bishop e4, queen e4, and this quite nice fork. You exchange rooks, and with 3 against 1 on the queen side, I think it's easily winning. Okay, so here knight d4, bishop d7. Castles here, knight b5, rook a8, bishop d4, and now a6 to avoid capturing on a7. And now this move. You go back. If he takes, then you have a bishop pair, so it's not a huge issue, a huge philosophy. But what happens if on this he takes on d4? Well, then we capture like this, and after knight e6 to go back to c3 and somehow to provoke c6 move, which could leave b6 weak, and also this d6 pawn quite strangely placed. Okay, so that's about d6, bishop e6. Let's see f6. Now we castle, knight d7, bishop e1, saving the bishop pair, a5, knight d2, go back, and now this move to challenge the pawn. So a4 is a must, and now we jump here, targeting b7. This rook a7, and now b4, and some nice pressure on the queen side because the knight on a6 is just silly there, so it looks really good. So d5, knight d8. I castle, and now e5. Blocking the position, and now we go knight d2. And now actually black has two options, to capture the bishop or to capture the knight. If he takes the knight, then after this and b6, there's b4, f5, and now f4. Trying to provoke some pawn push, which would make the bishop much more powerful. And if he keeps it like knight f7, then we go here and prepare e4 next. So in case of this, now it's a really tough battle for black, because black is worse on both sides of the board. White can play c5 at some point on the queen side, and also he might prepare the g4 break with e3, bishop f1, bishop e2, and putting his rook on the g file. So this looks quite bad. Okay, the second option is not to capture on d2, but to capture on c3. And after rook takes, now there are three options: b6, bishop d7, or f5. Let's see b6. We have f4 immediately. And now if black doesn't capture on f4, he captures, but if he plays a5, let's say, there is f5, and now we get this attack in the King's Indian style. So let's say f6, g4. Oh, this looks terrible. Knight e4, and if he tries something like this, you can just capture, and after this bishop h3. And now I think it even helps white, because you can just double on the g file and put pressure on g7. There's also lots of sacrifices in the air, so it doesn't help at all. Bishop d7, let's see just how it goes. Rook g3, bishop e8, queen d2, king h8. This one takes, and just double on the g. Okay, that's too much. So to avoid f5 and all these lines, black captures. And now gf. Because if we capture like this, then black might get some blockade with f6 and knight f7, knight e5. So that's a bit annoying. So let's capture like this. gf. f5, and now knight b3. White can't stop black's idea of transferring his knight with knight f3. So if he tries this, then there's knight b7, b4, and now a5. So if this, you take, rook a2, and you get some counterplay. Next, rook e8, and the e-pawn becomes a problem. Okay, so this move is not so good, so we do it this way. Knight b3, knight b7, and now we let knight c5 to happen. And then he goes to e4, and now we capture. Although rook e3 is also quite nice, to recapture like this and to force him to capture with the pawn. But after this, queen takes, is a bit sus, because after this there is a threat of rook e3 trapping the queen, so it has to go back, and I have this one, and this is some huge pressure. Huge. So actually they mentioned just FE. FE and then queen d2, bishop f5 and rook g3. With a small advantage, but it's really, really pleasant. Really pleasant to play. Okay, so let's go back a bit. Around here. There was b6, there was bishop d7, there was f5. Let's check out bishop d7 because we were looking at b6. And now this allows c5. And if you capture like this, there's knight e4. And on this b4. And now if captures, then take on c7. Not good. f5, knight c5 takes, and now d6. Taking this one, and after knight e6 there's bishop d5, and there is small compensation for the exchange. So after c5 the best is to go f5 immediately. But then we take and go rook c7, as in some lines. Now rook c8 is logical. Takes, queen a4. a6, rook c1, and now bishop d7, queen a5. And now this knight on d8 looks quite stupid. It disrupts the coordination of pieces. So after this, bishop b5 is played, bishop f1, queen f6, and now rook c8. This looks quite dangerous and quite passive for black. Knight f7, and now just this one. And it says here it's just a clear advantage, which I agree with. Okay, and the third move after this is f5, but still this allows c5, and at least now the knight doesn't feel so stupid. It goes to f7, but if it captures on c5, now there's no knight e4 like in the previous line. Now we have knight b3. And again, if b6, there's d6 and losing the rook. So e4 is a move. Knight c5, and now after this, there's queen c2. Queen d6 and rook d1. There's still pressure on the c7, so white is better even here. But what happens on this? Queen b3 and now b6. And if black tries to be more aggressive to play f4, then we take rook fc1, and after capturing queen g5 there's knight e4, and after this rook c7, bishop f5, now this, and now queen a3. But now wait, can you just why can't you capture on e2 now? Why? So let's put some edge, but what's this? Maybe there is something like rook f7 or... Wait. Rook f7, and if this... knight d6. Knight d6, and I go back. I take, rook c8. Here, check, or no, this one. This check. And somehow I give a check, but no, it's not that simple. I can... Maybe queen e7, but he has rook f6. Wait, let's check it out. With the engine, of course. Rook e2, rook f7, rook f7, knight e6. And now rook a2, the only move. Ah, you want to deflect the queen, that's nice. But wait, what happens after this? Knight f5, rook f5, rook c8, king f7, queen a7, of course, yeah. And then you lose the queen. So let's delete this one. But wait, here we have this line. Rook f7. Oh, you have queen f3 as well, yeah. Queen f3 as well to double attack. And then this queen f5, rook d4. Okay, maybe I should stick to this rook f7. Maybe it's more promising. So this knight d6, rook a2, knight f7, this knight h6, gh, and then just rook e1. Yeah, this looks slightly better, I would say. This looks okay. Not huge chances, but they exist. That's the most important. Okay, so we were here, c5, knight f7, queen b3, b6, yep. cd, cd, queen a3 to stop bishop a6. Oh no, 3 more branching points. Bishop b7, e4, or a5. Let's check out bishop b7, and after this rook fc8. That's the plan. So after e4 here, just go here, queen g5, and now f4. Takes here. Ah, you keep an eye on this rook. That's nice. Knight d4, rook ac8, and then e3 with advantage. Okay, so after this, queen g5, e4, and now f4 again. Queen h5. But if he goes to f6, what happens? Knight b3, bishop d5, and this one. Oh, this is nice. And in case of queen h5, oh, let's turn off this. In case of queen h5, then just knight b3, bishop d5, and again you have the similar compensation. Okay, that's reasonable. The bishop on d5 doesn't do much. It doesn't bring to connecting the rooks, so it's all good. But let's go back here, rook fc8. And now e4. I guess not to allow e4 by black. And now black took. And what happens if g6, then h4? So you might want to go h5 yourself. Okay, this knight c4, and now b5 allows knight a5, so that's not gonna work out. And this is just better position for white. So he took on c3, rook c3, and now he took knight e4. Also, bishop e4 is quite interesting, but he went for this and queen d8. And in case of bishop d5, there's this check, and if gf, then bishop d5. Because if queen f6, then again bishop d5 and rook c7, which is not so nice to allow. And also it will lose the a7 pawn, so it's nice to not allow this. After gf, bishop d5, it says here that white has good compensation, and it's difficult to defend it. So it's not so good to take the pawn. He went back, and now h4. a6. And here, if bishop c8 was played, then there is this, and after bishop d7 to just take on d6. After this, knight f7, king f7, dc, and white is almost winning because of the c pawn, and black's heavy pieces are so passive in this moment. So after a6, queen b3. And now there's some pressure here because there are ideas like bishop h3, bishop e6. Also, if bishop c8, to stop this, there is queen c4 followed by queen c7 and imposing in black's position, so it's quite bad for black. So after this, queen b3, that's plus equal. And let's check out the second option. After cd, cd, queen a3, let's check out e4, which in some way dislodges the d5 pawn. But we don't mind. We play rook fc1, and we are not afraid of losing the pawn because the knight can jump to d4, and we play e3, and we get the nice outpost. Bishop d7, knight b3, and now knight e5. It says here that better was to go queen e5, but still after rook c7, going here, e3, queen d5, rook a7, white is a bit better. Okay, but what happens if knight e5 happens? Then knight d4, rook fc8, which is apparently a mistake because of this takes, knight b5, and you lose either d6 or a7. Okay, so the third option after this is a5 to play bishop a6 next, but after this bishop a6 is not so effective. You play this, queen f6, and then e3 just. E4 is not effective because after f4 there is some counterplay for black. So we do this, and now e4. But now we get to the same route. Knight b3, and after queen e5, now he wins the pawn, but there is a nice positional idea behind this one. Knight d4, and after this f4. Wow, that's just beautiful. Now he can't capture on f3 because he's losing the exchange, at least. So it keeps the knight quite bad. It cannot jump to e5 or g5. Knight h6, and here it says after rook ac8 queen a4 is very strong, and black is doomed to passivity because now he cannot exchange and play rook c8 because it's checkmate like this. So he went for knight h6, and now rook c6, rook ac8, queen c3, takes, rook f7, and now just go back to c6. There are many ways white could end black's resistance, but the moves in the game are quite elegant. Now black took on a2, and now h3, just making the room for the king, stopping knight g4, quite nice. Oh, but he goes here. Oh. Ah, there is... On king h2 there is rook f6, followed by knight g4. That could have been quite embarrassing. Okay, so king f2, queen d3, and now queen c1. And now you want to go rook c3 to trap the queen. Also, yeah, this is quite bad. Yeah, you can also play immediately h3 after knight h6 right away, but maybe that would allow, after h6 allows this maybe, but I mean, even then you can exchange and claim you're doing fine. Maybe the point was to just triple the pieces on the c file with rook c6, queen c3, and yeah, it's very interesting, but I think this is much stronger to have it like this and to force black to get rook c8, because if he does this, I might have just rook a7 or just capture the pawn on b6. And actually later I did. After this, queen a2, now h3, and after this, king f2. And after this, queen c1, rook c3 comes next. It's no easy. Okay, I think I'm gonna cut this short, but tomorrow I'm going to do some middle game stuff, middle game play, I'm going to be doing the Dvoretsky's book about counterplay, about noticing the counterplay of my opponent. So that's gonna be a much longer session because the chessable course is quite long and it has like 300 examples, so I have to do much more work than I do on the openings. That's it, and see you very soon. Bye.